At its peak, the man from U.N.C.L.E. was everywhere. It helped ignite a global spy craze, turned David McCallum into an international phenomenon, and made espionage cool, glamorous, and fun. But just a few seasons later, it was gone. So what happened? Was it sabotage from within? Did THRUSH finally win? Or was U.N.C.L.E. undone by something far more powerful? Stick around because we're unpacking the rise, the fall, and the lasting legacy of the man from U.N.C.L.E. Hi, I'm Brian. Welcome to Boss City. In this episode, we're taking a deep dive into the man from U.N.C.L.E., one of the most stylish, influential, and widely successful television series of the 1960s, and one of the most misunderstood. In 1963, producer Norman Felton briefly collaborated with James Bond creator Ian Fleming on a concept for a spy series. Because of the recent success of the first Bond film, NBC became interested in this MGM TV project, which was briefly known as Ian Fleming's Solo. Due to health issues and pressure from the Bond movie producers, Fleming left the project, leaving behind Napoleon Solo and April Dancer and not much else. Felton then brought in Sam Rolfe to develop the series. Legally forced by the Bond producers to avoid anything too similar to their property, Rolfe built a completely distinct world, a stylish international spy series centered around a secret organization known as U.N.C.L.E. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. debuted in black and white on September 22, 1964, introducing the world to the United Network Command for Law and Enforcement, U.N.C.L.E. for short, an international organization made up of agents of many nationalities dedicated to maintaining political and legal order anywhere in the world.
My name is Napoleon Solo.
I am Illya Kuryakin.
Alexander Waverly, number 1, section 1.
The series starred Robert Vaughn and co-starred David McCallum and Leo G. Carroll as Alexander Waverly. Instead of battling a foreign nation at the height of Cold War tensions, U.N.C.L.E. faced off against THRUSH, an evil, stateless criminal syndicate, wealthy, invisible, and accountable to no one. Inspired by Cary Grant's character in Hitchcock's North by Northwest, a consistent element in each episode was an innocent person winding up at the center of the story. These characters allowed the audience to participate vicariously in each adventure. The tone of the first season was suspenseful espionage, noir influence with sly humor and Hitchcockian flair, high on style and low on gadgets. And sure, there were some high-tech toys, but the show was grounded with a semblance of plausibility that made the suspense and danger feel authentic. Airing on Tuesday nights at 8:30 on NBC against the Top 10 Red Skelton Show on CBS and McHale's Navy on ABC, the show floundered in the ratings and was moved in January to Mondays at 8, where it did slightly better even though its new competition was The Andy Griffith Show, the number 4 show in the ratings. Although U.N.C.L.E. finished the season at number 70 in the ratings, it was renewed by NBC for a second season. So how did a number 70 show become a big hit and one of the most talked about TV series on the air? Well, the Bond film Goldfinger, released at the end of December 1964, hit big. So big that some theaters screened it 24 hours a day. James Bond catapulted into a phenomenon, birthing the spy craze. TV networks and studios scrambled to capitalize, and several spy-related series debuted in 1965. There was I Spy, Get Smart, Wild Wild West, Honey West, and the British import Secret Agent. NBC already had the perfect vehicle to ride the spy wave, the man from U.N.C.L.E. Before the second season, in hopes of promoting the show, Vaughn and McCallum undertook an extensive publicity tour of NBC affiliates in top Nielsen cities, appearing on news and talk programs in each city. McCallum later said that the tour was an integral factor in the show's rise in the ratings. Next, Norman Felton remained as executive producer, while the series showrunner and U.N.C.L.E. visionary Sam Rolfe left the series. He was replaced by David Victor, the first of 5 successive showrunners who would supervise the final 3 seasons. Under Victor, the show became lighter in tone as humor in the scripts increased and transitioned from sly and witty to tongue-in-cheek, capitalizing on the chemistry between Vaughn and McCallum. The decision to film and broadcast the show in color brightened the visual look of the show, updating the 50s noir aesthetics with a colorful 60s palette. The show was again moved, this time to Friday nights at 10 p.m. against the less competitive Jimmy Dean on ABC and Slattery's People, and then The Trials of O'Brien on CBS. All three of those shows finished out of the top 70. The more desirable time slot and shift in tone helped attract many more viewers. But a key point to remember in the rise of the Man from U.N.C.L.E. is the expansion of the Illya Kuryakin role. In the original pilot, which was originally titled Solo, Kuryakin was a minor character with 5 minutes of screen time. Sometime between the completion of the pilot and the start of production, McCallum was elevated to co-star as indicated in the opening credits. McCallum's contract was a 7 out of 13 episode guarantee, so he did not appear in all of the season 1 episodes. Although season 1 suffered low ratings, McCallum's star was rising. Robert Vaughn, who signed on to be the star of a series titled The Man from U.N.C.L.E., not only found his screen time gradually decreased in favor of a supporting actor, but his popularity surpassed by this breakout star, felt no animosity towards McCallum, later saying, "I had no problem with it at all. It reduced the workload by half." Though the credits continue to list Vaughn as star and McCallum as co-star. During season 2, the series ascended from simply riding the spy craze to its own legitimate phenomenon. At the same time, Thunderball, the next Bond film, opened to even bigger box office returns, breaking all the records set by Goldfinger. Both Vaughn and McCallum became inundated with voluminous amounts of fan mail. U.N.C.L.E. fan clubs sprung up all over the world with 100,000 members in the US and in the UK. Store shelves filled with Man from U.N.C.L.E. merchandise, TV soundtracks, comic books, novels, kids' books, action figures from Gilbert, plastic model kits from Aurora, lunchboxes from Thermos, cars from Corgi, Halloween costumes, and of course, toy guns from Ideal Toys. The show was the subject of numerous spoofs, including various TV shows like a Bob Hope sketch called The Woman from Ant, My Favorite Martian, The Dick Van Dyke Show, The Patty Duke Show, and a Tom and Jerry theatrical short. Mad Magazine, of course, took its turn, and the regional department store chain Zodi's featured the girl from Zodi's in a print and TV ad campaign. The stars became highly coveted guests on variety and talk shows, with Vaughn appearing on shows hosted by Jimmy Durante, Red Skelton, Danny Kaye, Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas, and he even visited Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show. Vaughn also made a brief cameo as Solo in the Doris Day spy comedy The Glass Bottom Boat. And in a bizarre U.N.C.L.E. themed episode of the NBC MGM sitcom Please Don't Eat the Daisies, both Vaughn and McCallum make appearances and are credited not as themselves, but as their characters. And as was typical of TV stars in the 1960s, MGM ushered Vaughn into the recording studio. For more information about other TV stars' recording pursuits, take a look at my videos When TV Stars Make Records, Volume 1 and Volume 2. The links are below in the description. Vaughn emerged from the studio with Readings from Hamlet, a title that was as niche as it sounded. As promised, it featured Vaughn reciting passages from Hamlet with musical backing from members of the Wrecking Crew, and it failed to generate much interest. David McCallum's popularity continued to increase until it surpassed that of the show and reached a frenzied level. A veteran MGM executive told a British newspaper at the time, "I've never seen anything like this McCallum mania," placing it in the context of nearly 40 years spent watching stars rise and fade at the studio. McCallum's face was everywhere, on fan magazines, teen publications, and newspaper entertainment pages. And at one point, he was reportedly receiving as many as 32,000 letters a month. His visibility also extended well beyond U.N.C.L.E. He appeared on The Andy Williams Show, The Carol Channing Special, provided the voice of Beethoven for an ABC television special, hosted Hullabaloo, where he famously opened the show as Illya Kuryakin, and appeared on The Tonight Show, even helping Johnny Carson don an Illya Kuryakin costume on the air. In the theatrical concert film The Big TNT Show, McCallum served as presenter for musical performances by the likes of Petula Clark, Roger Miller, the Ronettes, Ray Charles, Ike and Tina Turner, Joan Baez, the Byrds, and the Lovin' Spoonful. Capitalizing on the phenomena, Capitol Records signed McCallum to a recording contract. Beginning in February 1966, he released a series of instrumental albums of current pop hits, mixed with a few originals, curated and conducted by McCallum himself. His debut LP, Music, A Part of Me, spent 24 weeks on the Billboard chart, peaking at number 27. Its follow-up, Music, A Bit More of Me, released that June, reached number 79. It was during the promotion for the first album that McCallum mania crossed from excitement into something more dangerous. At the height of his popularity, McCallum was scheduled to autograph copies of Music, A Part of Me, during a 2-hour appearance at Macy's department store in New York. Store security prepared for a crowd of 3,000 to 5,000. Instead, an estimated 15,000 teenage girls flooded multiple floors of the store, chanting, "We want David," blocking stairways and spilling into adjacent levels. According to the New York Times, girls fainted and wept as store clerks and executives joined Macy's security and crowd control. 20 officers from the nearby 14th Precinct were rushed in to assist. Alarmed by the size and volatility of the crowd, Macy's canceled the appearance before McCallum even reached the autograph area. At least 5 girls became so hysterical that they were taken to the store's dispensary, while others suffered minor injuries in the chaos. McCallum was escorted to the executive dining room for safety, where he admitted to reporters, "I'm a little shaky. They look like they would tear the place apart." Years later, he recalled that approximately $25,000 damage was done to Macy's during the ill-fated event, and that Times Square had to be shut down to facilitate his exit. Contemporary reporting suggested that this was not an isolated incident. According to the Morning Telegraph, McCallum's appearances on both The Tonight Show and Hullabaloo during the same New York visit were complicated by overwhelming numbers of fans attempting to get close to him. At a press conference in London not long afterward, security was again overwhelmed and fans physically reached McCallum, a moment captured in photographs that underscored just how intense McCallum mania had become. A key part of MGM's strategy in maximizing its return on investment on the production of the series and marketing The Man from U.N.C.L.E. overseas was the production of 8 theatrical feature films, created by expanding and re-editing existing television episodes, most often two-parters with new footage. According to series producer Norman Felton, an additional 2 or 3 days of filming were added to the 12 days allotted for a 2-part episode, allowing the inclusion of material that was slightly more adult in tone than was what was typical of the TV episodes. These films were originally conceived exclusively for international markets where the television series had not yet aired and were marketed under the Mr. Solo branding. Once the series began airing in these territories, MGM withheld the specific episodes from which the films had been derived, making that content exclusive to movie audiences. And these films were very successful internationally, where the first 3 grossed a total of $7 million. The distribution costs and the extra payments to the actors and the directors were the only added expense to the theatrical versions, making them highly profitable. At the height of the spy film boom in early 1966, studios flooded theaters with espionage films. When legal issues prevented MGM's spy feature The Liquidator from receiving a U.S. release, MGM opted to release the first 2 U.N.C.L.E. films theatrically in the United States as a double bill. While this pairing initially did brisk business, breakout success was thwarted when Pacific Theaters declined to book the film at its drive-ins, as they were basically expanded previously broadcast television episodes. Several months later, the 3rd U.N.C.L.E. film was released in America and was nowhere near as successful as the double bill, and none of the other U.N.C.L.E. films got stateside releases. Later that year, MGM cast both Vaughn and McCallum in separate, non-U.N.C.L.E. theatrical features, both filmed in Italy. The Venetian Affair, an action spy thriller starring Robert Vaughn, was released first and did modest box office business. Shortly afterward, McCallum's starring vehicle, the light comedy 3 Bites of the Apple, reached theaters. The film's title song featured McCallum singing, making it one of the few vocal recordings of his career. Neither the film nor its soundtrack made much impact commercially, and MGM ultimately paired 3 Bites of the Apple with the Venetian Affair on a quasi-Man from U.N.C.L.E. double bill, capitalizing on the popularity of the series. Right as the show was at its pinnacle, a seismic event occurred on American television: the debut of Batman. Viewers saw a colorful, fast, funny show unlike anything else on television. The series had a clever, intentionally humorous, campy style with 60s pop art visuals, with a score that blended jazz, rock, and surf music. The duality of the scripts appealed to adults and kids. It all seemed so fresh and exciting. Almost overnight, Batman swung into America's cultural consciousness, dominating conversations and impacting the ratings. For more on Batman, take a look at my Rise and Fall of Batman 66 video. There's a link in the description for that as well. Batman instantly supplanted the Man from U.N.C.L.E. as television's biggest phenomenon up to that time. While the Man from U.N.C.L.E. would finish its second season at number 13 in the Nielsen ratings, the arrival of Batman would have a profound and lasting impact on the series' longevity. Producer Felton had long resisted pressure from NBC to do a Girl from U.N.C.L.E. spin-off, but he became concerned how the saturation of spy series on the air might shorten the life of the U.N.C.L.E. franchise, as at one point 9 different shows with an espionage theme were on network television schedules. So he finally acquiesced in hopes of ensuring the franchise would produce enough episodes for lucrative sales and syndication. By the time the Girl from U.N.C.L.E. pilot had aired in February as an episode of The Man from U.N.C.L.E., NBC had already bought the show, but with the stipulation that Marianne Mobley be recast with Stephanie Powers in the lead role. The Girl from U.N.C.L.E. producer Douglas Benton and Robert Vaughn both stated that this change in casting altered the tone of the show, turning April Dancer from a vulnerable, conservatively dressed rookie agent who relied on an older agent, Norman Fell, into a strong, confident agent dressed in the latest mod fashions and an equal to her partner, played by young, dashing Noel Harrison, also in Groovy Threads. The fact that NBC wasn't ready to allow April Dancer to be the action hero that Solo and Kuryakin were constrained the writers. In a 2019 interview, U.N.C.L.E. writer Dean Hargrove said, "The producers who came under that show, in my opinion, thought the show was broad comedy. According to Norman Felton, it was comedy that just wasn't that funny." Even though there were some interesting scripts, including one from Richard Matheson of Twilight Zone fame, outrageously ridiculous plots and just plain silly scenes dominated the Girl from U.N.C.L.E.'s single season. Although shows of this type can be entertaining and the series has its own legion of fans, it bore little resemblance to the original U.N.C.L.E. Years later, many involved in The Man from U.N.C.L.E., including Vaughn and Felton, still believed that the series damaged the U.N.C.L.E. brand and helped hasten the franchise's demise. Felton went so far as saying, "I gave my approval, and I'm sorry many times." Over at the mothership, storms were brewing as NBC changed Man from U.N.C.L.'s time slot again for the 4th time in 3 seasons, moving it from its successful Friday 10 p.m. slot to less desirable Fridays at 8:30, where it ran against the second half of Time Tunnel and the top 15 show Hogan's Heroes. Yet another showrunner, Boris Inkster, took the reins and is often blamed for injecting camp and comedy into the series. Referring to him in an interview, writer Dean Hargrove said, "I thought one producer just didn't understand the show at all." Batman and Batmania changed the way networks thought TV shows should be. Camp, or the attempt at camp, made it into U.N.C.L.E. in season 3. Writers and directors from Batman were brought in to work on both The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and The Girl from U.N.C.L.E. Batman scribe Stanley Ralph Ross even used the same joke in an episode of Batman and an episode of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Robert Vaughn later said, "Each year we have a new producer, and the new producer was always trying to put his imprint on the show. By the third season, we were shooting cupcakes out of guns on the sides of cars. That was no longer James Bond. It became something very silly, and it went off the air in the fourth season for that reason." David McCallum had his own take. "There is a rule in comedy: you don't make jokes about jokes. You don't create farce about farce. We began to take farcical situations and then have directors perform them farcically. The quality of verisimilitude just dropped off." However, U.N.C.L.E. associate producer George Lehr later stated that Boris Inkster was being pushed by the network toward humor and slapstick, the same direction NBC was pushing The Girl from U.N.C.L.E. Nevertheless, the same series that seemed so cool and sophisticated in season 1 had, in season 3, Illya Kuryakin writing what he thinks is an atomic bomb, but is actually a giant stink bomb heading for the Las Vegas Strip. Camp works when the audience knows it's a joke. Spy fiction works when the audience believes the danger is real. You can't really do both at the same time. NBC believed camp would increase the already large U.N.C.L.E. fan base, but the tonal shift to silliness did the opposite. When season 3 debuted, Batman's fever-hot popularity was already cooling. A month into the season, Batman's 2 airings a week had dropped to 37 and 58, with Man from U.N.C.L.E. still in the top 20 and The Girl from U.N.C.L.E. at a respectable 23. However, by season's end, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. faded to number 46 and The Girl from U.N.C.L.E. fell to 69. NBC mistook Batman's campy tone for a lasting formula, misjudging a cultural fad that collapsed within a year. The result, Batman was trimmed to 1 night a week and Girl from U.N.C.L.E. was canceled. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. was renewed for season 4. In the fall of 1967, it was clear that TV's spy frenzy had lost its steam as the number of spy-related shows had decreased to 5 from a high of 9 just 18 months ago. And for the first time in 5 years, there were no new spy shows debuting on fall network schedules. For The Man from U.N.C.L.E., season 4 meant many changes. First, there was another showrunner, this time Anthony Spinner, fresh off a short stint as associate producer on The Invaders. Spinner brought with him several writers and a director from that more serious Quinn Martin-produced series. His arrival signaled another deliberate change in tone. Season 4 operated under a back-to-basics mandate. Stories were expected to feel credible and important, still glamorous and sophisticated, but faster, sharper, grounded in plausibility, and laced with controlled humor. The other change was the time slot. For the 5th time in 4 seasons, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. was moved again, this time back to the 8 p.m. Monday slot. This time, the competition contained a show that proved to be a surprisingly formidable opponent. CBS announced their fall 1967 schedule without Gunsmoke. A week later, CBS chairman William S. Paley demanded it be reinstated. But this time slot had been contractually allocated to Desilu's new show, Mannix. Not to upset Desilu's head and CBS' most valuable star, Lucille Ball, the 7:30 Monday night slot was cleared for Marshal Matt Dillon and friends. According to Gunsmoke's producer, John Mantley, the odds against Gunsmoke surviving the competition of The Monkees and the first half of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. with strong appeal for the young and Chuck Connor's new show, Cowboy in Africa, seemed hopeless. Meanwhile, the Monkees, serving as lead-in to The Man from U.N.C.L.E., fell from the 40s to the 60s as Gunsmoke broadened its audiences, and viewers weren't interested in switching channels halfway through Gunsmoke to catch The Man from U.N.C.L.E. at 8. Solo and Kuryakin were no match for the second half of Gunsmoke, followed by The Lucy Show, then ranked number 4 overall. Also, as Variety reported, Cowboy in Africa has surprisingly taken viewers from The Man from U.N.C.L.E. The result was catastrophic. By the week of October 25, 1967, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. had plunged to number 75 in the Nielsen ratings. That same week, Variety wrote, Man from U.N.C.L.E. was NBC's most likely candidate for mid-season cancellation. The series has probably been the victim of too many shifts in the schedule. By season's end, Matt Dillon had disposed of both the Monkees and Chuck Connors, as neither the Monkees nor Cowboy in Africa were renewed. But what about television's once dominant spies? Did they even make it to the end of the season? On November 14th, NBC officially announced the mid-season cancellation of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. MGM TV immediately laid off the entire production staff, including producer Anthony Spinner. Sources from the series told Variety that they did not know who would finish post-production work on the film in the can. So that was it. Barely 2 years after the U.N.C.L.E. phenomena and the surge of McCallum mania that engulfed television and popular culture, the moment had passed. The spy frenzy that once drove the medium was fading, reshaped by the rise of camp in the wake of Batman, diluted by overexposure, and further complicated by The Girl from U.N.C.L.E. and its damage to the parent series' identity. U.N.C.L.E. would live on in syndication. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and The Girl from U.N.C.L.E. were bundled together into a package of 128 episodes. 5 installments of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. that formed the basis for the 3 theatrical U.N.C.L.E. films released domestically were withheld, along with one additional episode held back due to legal reasons. Just 22 days after NBC announced the show's cancellation, MGM placed a 2-page ad in Variety offering the series to local stations, touting with more than a little hyperbole that no other series had finished its network run with higher ratings and shares in the major markets. Rather than cite national ratings, the emphasis in this ad was specifically on big cities where the show had performed best. By January 1968, MGM's latest ad seemed to reveal that early sales were not what had been hoped. The ad characterizes the stations who have bought the show as smart broadcasters, capitalizing on NBC's goof of relying on misleading national ratings. Only a limited number of early buyers are listed, so clearance clearly was still a work in progress. Nearly a year later, in October 1968, MGM was still making the case for the show. A full 2-page ad in Variety highlighted weekend success on WNEW-TV in New York. That focus on weekends demonstrates how U.N.C.L.E. was finding success in specific programming slots. In Los Angeles, it aired at 11 p.m., which is another slot where hot syndicated properties didn't typically air. The fact that MGM was still purchasing major ad space 11 months after first offering the show suggests the show was a more difficult sale than, say, Batman or Star Trek were. Interest in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. never disappeared. In the years following cancellation, a number of proposed reunion projects failed to launch, including one with a script by Man from U.N.C.L.E. creator Sam Rolfe. In 1982, Robert Vaughn and David McCallum reunited on Good Morning America for the first time in 14 years. When asked about revisiting U.N.C.L.E., Vaughn replied, "We've discussed this for many years, discussed about 8 years ago at MGM, discussed as recently as yesterday. I'd certainly be interested in doing the motion picture or TV movie, either one which has been discussed." A revival finally materialized in 1983 when Viacom and Michael Sloan Productions produced The Return of the Man from U.N.C.L.E., the 15 years later affair for CBS. It was met with solid ratings and mixed reviews. While audiences welcomed the return of the stars, many fans felt the core elements that had defined the original series were absent. Creator Sam Rolfe was especially blunt in his assessment of Sloan's script. "He screwed it up so badly. I wish these people would not take other people's material. He's supposed to be an original creator. Let him create his own thing and screw it up." U.N.C.L.E.'s appeal endured nonetheless. In the early 1990s, Sam Rolfe wrote a made-for-cable revival script for the TNT network that ultimately went unproduced. And in 1993, the film rights were acquired by producer John Davis. After years of stalled development with various directors attached, including Matthew Vaughn and Steven Soderbergh, a feature film finally debuted in theaters in 2015 under director Guy Ritchie. The resulting The Man from U.N.C.L.E. was a box office disappointment and received mixed reviews. However, in 2021, Rolling Stone magazine ranked it number 50 on its list of the greatest action films of all time. A reminder that U.N.C.L.E, even when it seems defeated, is eternally resilient. So there you have it, the rise and fall of the man from U.N.C.L.E. I want to thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Many blessings to you. Until next time, Open Channel D, this is Boss City Brian, signing off.